All right, everybody. Thank you very much for joining in today. My name is Joshua Fox, and today we're going to be presenting on ClearPass. It's going to be a ClearPass 101 and 4-hour agenda. First, I'd like to cover with you guys some of the security landscape out there today. We're going to do a nice little overview of ClearPass. And this is going to be a basic 101 to kind of give you some of the features that ClearPass really has and what it's all about, if you will. And then we're going to move into security exchange and dynamic segmentation, which I think are two really big key differentiators. So I'd like to talk about those a little bit more in depth and kind of get you guys excited about it. All right. From there, we'll move on to Guest, Onboard, and OnGuard, some of the extensible features that ClearPass has to offer. And then we'll go ahead and round that up with licensing because we want to make sure everybody knows how ClearPass is actually purchased and so on. All right. So first of all, what is the security landscape like today? Well, as you guys are probably aware, and if you've probably seen in many of the different media outlets and studies done, we have a lot more focused and targeted attacks than we ever did in the past. We also have a threat bubble that's expanding rapidly. With all the devices coming onto our networks, just a multitude of attack vectors has really increased quite dramatically. And because of that, our security teams are really under a lot of stress. They're under a lot of stress to make sure they're properly securing all of these devices and they have proper visibility into the network. Now, a lot of devices may be connecting in different ways. Up to 50% of IoT actually might be wired. We have many wireless devices. Not all devices are really supporting 802.1.x. Some do, some don't. And customers really want to manage every device that's coming into the network, and more importantly, they also want the visibility of what those devices are so they can properly secure those devices. Now, ClearPass is going to support any infrastructure and need that we have for these use cases, so let's go ahead and get right into it. So at its core, ClearPass is a network access control solution. You can think of it as a sort of gatekeeper that gives you a variety of tools in order to make decisions on what different devices coming in can do and what they should be able to access. We can discover and profile devices at the time that they're entering in, and then we can actually fingerprint those devices whenever they are first authenticating to the network. Now, this gives us visibility into what devices are on our network, and it also gives us a sort of starting point for what that device was when it came onto the network in case it were to change or become infected by a certain sort of malware. We also have the ability to have precision access privileges. So we can make devices on what resources a device can or should get to on a variety of different contexts, like devices, users, and many others. We can also, over wired, Wi-Fi, or VPN, authenticate these users onto the network. At the same time, we are also able to work with third-party types of security, not just limited to security, though, but we can actually do, I'm sorry. If anybody is connected, please mute yourself there. We would like to sort of avoid some of those loud distractions, okay? But to get back to it, we can also have enforcement, right? We can have an event trigger ClearPass to do something like quarantine a device or revoke its access privileges. So this is a core of everything ClearPass does, right? So what is actually just built into ClearPass, right? Well, we have a very rich policy engine. This is what's allowing us to create those policies and make decisions on where things can or can't go. We have a variety of different authentication methods, like 802.1x, MAC authentication, TACX, Radius. We also have the very rich guest feature set for guests coming onto the network. We also can profile devices, as I mentioned, and fingerprint those devices so we know what their starting configurations are actually looking like. And we also have a large contextual database to be able to create the policies with our policy engine. Now, for IT, we have some policy simulation. We also have the ability to track access. That can be pretty important with auditing. You can think people connect or access into the network. We want to know when they did, how long they were there, and so on. We have a lot of template-based policy creation to make policy more automated and easier to set up. There's an LDAP browser. We have per session logs, a lot of advanced reporting, and a lot of mixture with AirGroup, which is a sort of a way to do things like Apple Air and printing and so on without actually having to configure those things. We also support something known as Security Exchange. Now, we are going to spend a lot more time on this, but it gives us third-party integration through API, syslogs, extensions, and ingress events. So let's talk about, we have these policies, right? What does that really mean? What can we really do with that? Well, with a policy, with the right context, you can make a lot of powerful decisions on what devices are allowed to do, which in turn is going to equal stronger security. So, for instance, we can actually look at the device type. Is this a sensor? Is this a phone? Is this a laptop? And we can make a decision based on what this device is onto where it should go and what it should be doing in our network. At the same time, we can work with a lot of different mobile device management and enterprise management solutions to see who owns the device. Is it registered to our network? Is the the OS, is that up to date? Have we been running our virus scanners in a timely manner? Are those up to date as well? And we can make decisions off of that. We can also make decisions on the identity of who is connecting. So, for instance, John Hansen here, he might be in sales. His title is COO. We could authenticate him against Active Directory and then give him access to things like Office 365. And we can also enforce on things like location. What building is this? What floor on that building? What country are you in? And we can make these decisions in context with one another. When you start adding lots of different usable context, you're able to make more granular decisions, have more granular control, and automate that control in a much easier fashion. Now, a really good example of this might be we have an enterprise laptop and a personal BYOD or a personal device that they've brought into our network here. We're going to be authenticating the same way. We're using the same SSID to connect in. However, the enterprise laptop might get access to things like the internet and any corporate resources on the intranet, whereas that BYOD phone, maybe we say internet only. We don't really want you connecting in and taking advantage of some of our corporate resources, right? As you can see, both devices connected to the same thing, but we've made a different type of decision based on the context of the device type that's connected in. Now remember, we can make those decisions on a variety of different contexts. This is just an example of what the device type context would look like. Now that you know a little bit about ClearPass and at its core what it's supposed to be, let's talk about Security Exchange. Why should you care? Okay, so Security Exchange is a way for ClearPass to share its relevant information with third-party technologies to achieve greater control, greater security, or to achieve a sort of custom result. Now, we can share with a lot of third-party, and we can actually take information from those third parties to do different sorts of things. And I'll give you guys a couple of examples here as we go over these slides. Now, we have an ecosystem of security vendors we work with, 150 plus partners. So there's a lot of kind of boxed solutions, if you will, on what you can share and what that sharing can do for you. To go over all of them would be its own session because it can get pretty in-depth, but just know that this is included with the access licenses. And if for some reason that technology partner isn't in our ecosystem, that's okay because we can actually leverage and build our own custom types of integration through REST APIs, dictionaries, and extensions. So let's look at a couple of the use cases or examples. So in the case of firewalls, proxies, and UEBAs, NTAs, which are user entity behavior analytics, that would be a lot like our introspect, and NTA is a network traffic analyzer. But by sharing information with a firewall, we can apply policy enforcement at a greater level. We can share things like the user or device context with the firewall, which usually might not have that kind of intelligence, and now we can build policy around that instead of policy on VLAN. When we talk to dynamic segmentation, that'll actually become another pretty powerful point here. In the cases of a UEBA or an NTA, we can actually take some of the device attributes while we're profiling and fingerprinting and then use that as a baseline for those types of machine learning and analytics tools so that they can get up and running much quicker and actually start working in a much faster type of way. From a mobile device management or an enterprise management solution, we can gather device context and we can share that with the mobile device management and vice versa, share some of what the mobile device management has with us. This could be enrollment status, device ownership, things like blacklisted applications, jailbroken devices, or just even profiling the device type. Now, a good example of this might be somebody might be using AirWatch, for example. Using AirWatch, you could see if a device is jailbroken or not. Well, we can actually take that information from AirWatch and do one of those actionable events, take that device, quarantine it, or even revoke its network access right on the fly. All just using a policy and then sharing context with another type of security solution. Another way, and this is a little bit outside of security, but we actually do a lot with things like visitor management. Now, this could be automated guest user provisioning or email slash SMS delivery of guest credentials, or even capturing additional information. I actually have a good real-life example here for this one. A little over a year ago, we were working with a hotel that was using Micros Opera, which is a property management system. And what this product would do is it would basically collect information of people registering into the hotel and helping them check out. And we were able to use ClearPass to basically take the information when somebody would register in and create their guest credentials automatically on the back end, give them the rights for what they wanted to do, and then even do things like charge them extra for premium Wi-Fi. At the same time, when that guest checks out, we automatically revoke their privileges with ClearPass. So definitely, very security related, but don't limit yourself there. Lots of products out there are in need of using information that ClearPass might have, and ClearPass can make use of the information that those products might be collecting to kind of achieve a custom result, if you will. Now, here's just a quick snapshot of some of the different vendors that we're really supporting in some of our exchange. Now, this isn't everything. You probably need several slides to kind of show all of them. But we work with a lot of the perimeter next-gen defense, like your Juniper, Checkpoint, Palo Alto, Fortinet. We have a lot of MDM, like your Citrix and AirWatch. We also work with a lot of our Splunk and ArcSight, Seams and automation, multi-factor authentication vendors, as well as our regular networking vendors. Actually, some of our most popular customers are our Cisco and Juniper, customers, just because of some of the profiling and some of those features that we've kind of talked about and what we bring to the table. All right, so let's talk a little bit about dynamic segmentation. I'm sorry, my PowerPoint here looks like it's restarting for some reason. Apologize for that. Let's jump right back down here to this slide here, and we'll start from there. Sorry about that, guys. All right. So to understand dynamic segmentation, it's probably good to understand a little bit of the problems that we face today from a VLAN perspective. VLANs are really the de facto way that we secure and segregate our networks. But they can become really complex really fast. A lot of times you have to add your guest VLANs, that's a policy. You do the same for your desktop VLAN. You might do the same for your voice VLAN or headless VLAN, and then you're extending that to the rest of the network. Well, a big problem of this is you're tying VLANs to specific ports, and the firewalls or the enforcement mechanisms that we have are now basically enforcing on a static environment, right? What happens if somebody takes a phone or a desktop and they plug it into a different port, or they bring their own device in and plug it into that port, right? Those manual moves, adds, and changes are a real burden to IT. A lot of times that ends up in tickets that have to be addressed, and they have to go in, and it's a lot of manual work. We have a lack of visibility for the same problem. Any of those ports can kind of be connected to, and that lack of visibility is a real paradise for malware. Again, the port and policy, it's not really tied to a device or a user plugging into it. It's really the same kind of problem as that kind of paradise for malware, right? And again, on the firewall, that policy is just on the VLAN packet, and it doesn't care about the identity or the device that's connecting into the network. So enter in dynamic segmentation. Now, dynamic segmentation comes from dynamic, which is our users and devices, and then segmenting that traffic based on the application or the destination using ClearPass. Doing it in this way, we actually eliminate the need for a lot of VLANs, because now we're not creating that corporate, that BIOD or that IoT VLAN. We're creating a policy in ClearPass. And that policy is what's dictating where a person is allowed to go rather than that manual VLAN. This gives us automation, but it also gives us this concept of a colorless port, because it doesn't matter if it's a printer or a phone or a person's personal device or an enterprise device. When they connect it into that wired port or they connect wirelessly into the network, that's when we're making the decision on where they should be able to go, rather than that manual VLAN sort of solution. As you can see, that really kind of simplifies a lot of some of the networking issues we have today. It's just a lot more automated and easier to create a set of roles on identity and context rather than manually creating all the different VLANs you have, going into a firewall and applying policies to those VLANs. It also unifies what we can do in terms of that policy across the entire architecture. So what do we need to make dynamic segmentation happen? Well, from an Aruba perspective, we need ClearPass Policy Manager. We're going to need access points or switches, right? We need a connection method or a way to connect in. And then you would need something like a mobility controller or a gateway in the solution as well. Now, we can do very similar things with other vendors. It's not like you're tied here to Aruba. As I mentioned earlier, Aruba loves to work with other vendors, and that's why our security exchange is such a big deal with us. But these are the basic building blocks that you need to sort of get that kind of solution going. All right. So now that we've talked about some of the dynamic segmentation features, let's move into some of the expandable applications, some of the things that we can add on to ClearPass for a little bit of extra capability. So ClearPass Guest is basically a way for us to automate and securely bring guests onto the network while collecting information from them and that's basically what it does there. So we can really work with any industry, any number of guests. We can work with any device, any network vendor. Now, we have a lot of self-service or sponsored portals. So self-service would be I come in and I automate my own connection into the network, create my own credentials through the ClearPass Guest portal. A sponsor involves a sponsor giving access to the network after a person has requested that access. We can also do social media login, so somebody can log in using their credentials from something like a Facebook or a Twitter or so on. Now, this is the only secure guest app in the industry, and we can give different types of access, like we mentioned before, like internet or managed intranet. The portal itself actually fits on laptops, phones, and tablets. If you've played a lot with Captive Portal, you might have seen some of the Captive Portals out there don't really show up quite well for, say, a phone versus a laptop and so on. So we're really going to fit on any device here. So some of the cool things you can do is you can add your own branding and data fields, right? Now, what if you have advertising or your own mobile app that you kind of want to tie into that? That's okay, go for it. We also integrate with third-party billing and property management systems. Think back to that example I gave earlier where they were using Micros Opera, right? We're going to integrate with those billing and property management systems right through the guest portal here. We can also do portals that are different per department or location. Maybe it's a multi-site and you want to have the specific address at each different captive portal. Or maybe it's something like a mall and you're handling the security for everything and you want each store to have its own specific captive portal. As I mentioned before, we also have social media login, which is becoming more and more popular, and also a really good way for us to collect that social media information for our own business needs through Facebook, Twitter, and so on. Now, we also support multi-factor authentication. Captive Portal allows us to bring somebody in. For those of you not familiar with multi-factor authentication, it's much more secure because it's taking into account something you own versus something that you know. A little bit more secure if you have a compromised password or something of that nature, it's not enough to break in. You would need to actually have the physical device that somebody would be using, plus that something that they should only know. So kind of what that workflow would look like is who are you? You know, you're using your username and so on. Then something you have. This is probably going to be something like a text message. I'm connecting it with my phone or something of that nature. That text message can be pushed out to me. Now I have that something that I have. Then we can request approval. Once approval has been given, then we can say something we know. That's the password that we would want. So if multi-factor authentication is something that you're looking for, this is definitely something we can do. Now what you're seeing here, this is actually something called Duo. Now we can do multi-factor authentication with ClearPass itself, but this is kind of highlighting that sometimes multi-factor authentication, you might be using something separate like Duo, or one of the real popular ones is Azure multi-factor authentication. Using Security Exchange, we can integrate with that and use that other solution that you might already be using instead of just the baked-in ClearPass one. So ClearPass Onboard is basically meant for BYOD, or bringing your own device, and it's a way to automate bringing a device onto the network and giving it all the necessary configurations that it needs. In the past, you might have had to have an IT staff or something like that open up a ticket and then manually bring that device on. We can do that automatically in an automated fashion with ClearPass. We can also do built-in certificate authority, and CAs are definitely a lot more secure and a lot more simple to use than just your regular password and username. We can also include our mobile device management right in the workflow. So for instance, a device being onboarded onto the network, we want to have, we used AirWatch as an example earlier, so I'll use it again here. We wanted to have that AirWatch client directly installed onto the device. Well, we can include that right in the workflow, right during the onboarding process in an automated fashion, rather than manually having to have to put that onto the device. So here, the whole concept is we're trying to add security here without adding to that IT workload, and we're making it as easy as possible for users to connect in. So here's kind of an example of what an authentication with a user device certificate would be like. Your user is redirected to the portal. They enter their Active Directory credentials. It starts the onboarding process. Then we automatically place them in the proper network segment, and we give them a certificate. Now when they connect in, there's no more passwords. That certificate's there. That certificate says that's what that device is, and then we'll be able to connect in easy peasy. Now we can set time limits on these certificates, and we can revoke them. So for instance, maybe you're in a university or something of that nature. You can give that certificate to a student for the term that they're going to be attending your university, and then revoke that certificate at the end so that they don't have the ability to keep connecting into your network indefinitely. We can also onboard headless devices, basically the non-802.1x or your Internet of Things. Now, what's cool about this is we can actually fingerprint those devices coming on and sort of create a profile for them to make the onboarding process easier and more automated. Now you don't have to specifically onboard, each sensor or so on that you're bringing. You just have that profile attached to that specific type of headless device that you've already fingerprinted. Now, lastly, we're going to go over OnGuard here. Now, what OnGuard is a posture assessment to ensure the health of the device before giving it network access. So we support multiple operating systems here with persistent and dissolvable agents, and it also works with those BYOD workflows. But the concept is when a device comes onto the network, we're going to check and make sure that its operating system is the correct operating system that we want. For instance, Android 6.0 has a lot of vulnerabilities that are never going to be patched. We've moved on to a new version of Android. Maybe you don't want to allow such a security risk onto your network. Well, we can check, make sure that it's running on the correct operating system, and then say nay to that Android device coming in because it's not really meeting our security standards. So here's an example of really similar of what we were just talking about, but somebody with Symantec endpoint protection. They want to access the network. ClearPass OnGuard is going to detect whether or not that antivirus is up to the standard that you want. Inside of ClearPass, you can basically set what that standard is. When's the last time you ran an antivirus? When's the last time you updated it? Is it on the correct version? And so on. And sort of the workflow that this is going to look like is you try to access the network. ClearPass OnGuard is going to detect, see if it's compliant or not. If it's not, we're going to block the access to the network resources, and then we're going to auto-remediate that device to make sure that it's coming up to the direct level, and then we're going to allow them onto the network. This is going to minimize our risk to the network, and it also allows users, again, to self-service themselves, automating the process and reducing the workload from an IT perspective. All right, so now that we've kind of given you the 100-foot overview of everything ClearPass, how is it purchased? What do you get? How do you actually get ClearPass in the environment, right? So let's look at the 6.7 licensing here. Now, we did introduce a new type of license called entry, but I kind of want to go over this first before introducing the new one. So first and foremost, you start from the bottom up here. You build your foundation. What you're going to want to know is it a virtual or is it a hardware appliance? Now, hardware appliances are sold the C1000, C2000, and the C3000. These are sized based on the amount of endpoints that you're going to authenticate. The C1000 is 500, the C2000 is 5,000, and the C3000 is 25,000. Now, the perpetual virtual appliance is just one. You actually get to pick the ISO that you want, and you can pick the C1000, C2000, or C3000 type of ISO as long as you have the server hardware to basically get the specs that you need to support those larger appliances. Now, once you've decided virtual or hardware appliance, I like to recommend that you do two of those. I always want to do, my NAC solution and a high availability. Then you're going to add access licenses. Now, access licenses are needed in the amount of devices that you would want to authenticate using ClearPass. Basically, anything with an IP address that you're going to authenticate in, you're going to want to use an access license. Now, access licenses is going to give you your 802.1x. It's going to give you your MAC authentication, the web user registration and authentication, your multi-factor, the TACX, OnConnect, which is needed for some of the dynamic segmentation, all the APIs that you would need for security exchange, and then your endpoint visibility. From here, if you would like to add the ability to do the endpoint posture assessments for that health check, ensuring devices are good coming onto the network, then you would add OnGuard. Now, Access and OnGuard are both per device licenses. So any device that you want to be able to run that scan on, you're going to want an OnGuard license. Now, Onboard is the odd child here because this is actually a user-based license. So for every user that you want to have your automated onboarding feel, you just add the Onboard license. This also gives you access to that certificate authority, or the CA that we talked about. All right. So entry licenses are a brand new feature, and I'm really glad they added this because it gives you a way to get into ClearPass, which can sometimes be a little cost prohibitive if you don't need some of the features that access licenses are going to give you. So it gives you all of the access license features except for TACX, security exchange, and profiling. So if you're integrating ClearPass with some kind of third-party equipment, or you're looking to do that profiling for automation at the beginning, you probably don't want to go straight to the entry licenses. Now, there is an upgrade path from entry into access. So if you start with entry, you can move up into the access licenses. And this is kind of a depiction of what that looks like. We're still starting with the virtual appliance. Now you're just making the decision, do I want the entry because I don't need those access features, or do I want to go with the full access license? Now, if you do go with the access upgrade, just remember that it is going to come at a bit of a premium for you. It's about 20% on that. So if you paid $100 for an access license or $40 for an entry, by the time you were to upgrade into access, you're now looking at $120 instead of that $100 for just the one access, right? So it's about 20% more expensive to go the upgrade route. Now, a couple of quick caveats here. If you are upgrading from entry to access, you do have to upgrade all of your entry licenses. If you had 5,000 entry licenses, all 5,000 have to go up to access. You can't do 250 or 1,000 and so on. Now, if you did buy entry licenses in the beginning but found out you oversubscribed, you can work with TAC to bring your number of entry-level licenses down to the number that you're actually using before you upgrade into access to kind of avoid some of the additional cost of buying more than you need. Now, keep in mind that if you do the upgrade, you are going to be paying the support for the access upgrade plus that entry, so there is going to be a little bit of a cost there. Sort of the way I look at these is try to figure out if access is ever something that they're going to need before you pull the trigger on the entry. Try to get them exactly what they want from the beginning because the upgrade does add that additional cost. So it would be better to bite the bullet up front and go to access if you did plan on using those features, or maybe even talk about doing a type of phased solution approach. Okay, so one last caveat here. When you use an entry-level licenses, you're not going to be able to use OnGuard. And if you do decide to buy into ClearPass Device Insight, you're not going to be able to use that at all either. You do still get to use your BYOD features, so you're still okay there. But that posture health assessment as well as the device insight are two features you're not going to be able to take advantage of. All right, guys, now lastly, we're going to go over some of the promotions that we have here. Right now, if you sell $100,000 worth of switching or Aruba switching, you're basically going to give you ClearPass for free for 1 year. Now, this is a subscription, and it's just the access licenses, but it's a real good way to get your foot in the door, show some of the power and ease of configuration that you get out of ClearPass, and then the next year, you could either keep up with your subscription, pay for a perpetual, or if you wanted, you could just throw it away, but I don't really see that happening. A lot of times people get into ClearPass, and they get hooked after they see the power that this is going to offer their IT staff. Now, lastly, if you guys are interested at all in ClearPass, you've heard some of this, you want to learn more, you want to get somebody certified, you want to start selling ClearPass, or maybe you even want to start being an MSP that uses ClearPass to secure networks. Cloud Harmonics is an Ingram Micro company here, and they do actually offer the certification trainings for something like ClearPass. They're the only Aruba Premier training partner in the United States. They have certified instructors with a lot of experience out there deploying ClearPass, and they actually host the labs right on Cloud Harmonics platform. They do ClearPass Essentials. So if you would like to get that certification and get into ClearPass, they offer it. They also offer the SWDI, the IAW, Airwave, as well as Aruba switching, fundamentals, and implementing the campus switching solutions. I will send this link out to everybody at the end of the presentation here after we all get off the line. But if you're interested, go check out that site, go take a look at some of the classes they offer, and get some of those certifications under your belt. All right, with that concludes my presentation here. I'm going to open this up to questions. If anybody has a question for me, please speak now, and I'll go ahead and answer those for you. All right. Any questions out there? Anybody? Anything? This is the opportunity. All right, guys. I'm not really seeing any questions come through here, so I'd like to thank everybody for joining. After the presentation ends here, look out for the link there for that Cloud Harmonics training. Also be sending out a survey to kind of see your guys' thoughts on the training here. Was it too deep? Was it not deep enough? Would we want more information on a specific topic? As well as kind of pull you and see what you'd like for the next training that we do, and get you the link to the recorded webinar here in case you'd like to share that with anybody else, or even just watch it again for your own knowledge. Thank you again very much for joining, and have a wonderful rest of your day.